the nature of the self. First of all, with any philosophical question, I'm going to be quite cynical and discerning about it and just say, why do you want to know? What is it going to do for you? And it makes me think about libertarianism and how I'm an advocate for it and what I'm actually asking of people. And there's a very pervasive confusion about isms, so to speak, in the sense that they think that what you're purporting or what you're endorsing is a competing system that needs to be integrated in the exact same way that the previous system was, and it's not. All that libertarianism is trying to find the most basic and reliable conditions of human existence, and not even human cooperation, just human interaction, and making sure that your actions and thoughts and opinions are as close to those and as close to reality as possible, so that there is no lies, there is no misdirections, there's no way that you can be convinced and gaslit of things that aren't true in order to exploit you. And that's essentially all that it is. It's more of a psychiatric position than a political one, because politics as such is really more about, I mean, the best way to think about politics is if you've ever seen those grocery carts that have the little steering wheel for the toddlers and that little rubber car, that little plastic car that they have in front of the in front of the shopping cart. Politics is the steering wheel on that. So it gives you the illusion of thinking that you're in control, whereas real incentives are actually driving the thing. And what I find upsetting too is that I've been in politics enough, and I've interacted with enough politicians, and I've interacted with a lot of businessmen and people that have done something. Sort of what the Silicon Valley folks would call builders, not critics. And I realized that I'm more like them than the people in the middle, in the sense that these folks are very practical and they recognize incentives and they understand the nature of the system that they're in. It was once described to me that politics internally there's a tremendous anarchy in that. And anarchy really just means like a lot of ad hoc and voluntary associations in the context of a system. So it's you scratch my back, I'll scratch your back. They don't really do well with ideology. In fact, no one really does with ideology, because the way that the world works is really just a matter of what can I get away with? And everything goes back to just what can I get away with? And so most ethical and moral instruction, there's a moment that lives sort of rent-free in my head, and I keep thinking about it randomly, but I was, years ago, I was working in an apartment building as just property management, whatever, and we had to do walkthroughs of the parking garage, and I remember I came across this rough sleeper, this unhoused fellow, and he was doing, whatever the meth heads do, just methy things, hunched over a backpack, constantly rearranging it, just generally sketchy, kinetic stuff, crackhead, like the motions and machinations of crackheads. Anyway, so he was doing some fucking thing, and I come up to him and inform him that he's trespassing and he needs to leave. And the first thing that he says to me is, well, first of all, you didn't check to see if I should be here. And this like split second where I'm like, oh God, I didn't. That was the most that I've ever been sort of intellectually checkmated in my life. But the idea here is that it's instructive because, again, when somebody invokes morality and ethics, they're usually trying to get something out of you, or they're trying to convince you that something that you know to be wrong is actually right. So we compartmentalize. We keep our ethics in different little bell jars. We know that it is wrong to steal from people. But if our livelihood depends on a government contract that is funded by taxpayer money, we tell ourselves a moral story to say, no, you know what, we're not compelling someone, we're not taking their money, we're not stealing from them. You see, it's this whole democratic process, right? Because like right and wrong is determined when 51 people say something is right, and 49 people disagree. It's a simple numbers game, and you flip flop back and forth between what is superordinate to the democratic process and what is subordinate to the democratic process, even though you know it's all wrong. And that is essentially what libertarianism is trying to do. We recognize that you're just trying to survive, and that's fine. All that we're asking you to do is to just not lie to yourself about it. And that's it. Because not everyone is a political agent. Not everyone is a revolutionary. In fact, one of the most controversial opinions that I'll have, I think, is I just want to tell people, it's like, sweetie, you don't need to have a political opinion on anything. You really don't. A plumber doesn't have to know electrical. An engineer doesn't have to know how to fix his car. Not everybody needs to be a political agent or actor. Some of the most intelligent people that I know are politically ambivalent because they have the humility to just say, the system is so much larger than myself, and I'm not going to have much of an effect on it. And this is sort of an expansion on that Petersonian kind of like clean your room thing, where it's a lot more, you know, he distills it quite nicely, but there's a lot more to it. In the sense that, what do you actually have control over? And I've written about this in essays, but just the idea that when people are concerned about the planet or they're concerned about these large political movements, it is a matter of what are they avoiding, right? Because large political movements, it's over there. Whereas if you're in a shitty relationship or you're constantly underfoot of your boss and you're around all your friends and they've got battle axes for wives that talk shit about them in public, or just in your own relationships if you're in an exploitative arrangement, or if you're deeply unhappy. Even though, I mean, if you think about it, like the process of getting a divorce versus the process of having a revolution, I mean, if you haven't had the divorce yet, do that and then get back to me about the revolution. Like, just sort of prove yourself. Because when we talk about the nature of the self, I love this idea about the purpose of a system is what it does, which erodes and melts away all of the sanguine thinking that we have, and a lot of the bullshit narratives that exist perpetuate things. It's just, all right, what has the system been doing? I know what its stated goals are. That's great. I know what its stated goals are, but what the hell is it actually doing? And so I think with the nature of the self, it's not about, we can go in all these like philosophical and neuropsychiatric things, but ultimately it is, the self is what it does. And so if the self is, if you are just a subordinate cog in a machine, and you are just a repetition of some greater narrative, or if you're just an agent of evil, then that's what the self is. That's what you are. Whatever you do, that is what you are. And one doesn't really have to have a lot of ideas about Plato's cave and the bicameral mind and internal deliberation. It's just look at how you actually operate in the world, and that'll tell you everything that you need to know. The idea of virtue signaling is very interesting because, I mean, one, you're basically confessing all the things that you wish you were and aren't. And you're just trying to get rid of the psychological stress of that discord, essentially. People confess. It is odd. Like, I don't think people realize just how much psychiatric information they fume off into the universe. They might be a bit blind to it. It's sort of like I guess it's like nose blindness, where you can't smell your own BO, so to speak, where, if only people knew how much they broadcast. And even me, I do go back and try to think. I actually listen to these things and try to psychoanalyze myself and sort of like steelman the case that I'm insane and sanctimonious and that I have like a huge missing part of me. And I realized too, one of the most intimate acts between people is actually substantial disagreement, because everything is at risk there. If you really think about, well, I'll just say it. Like, if you're at work, like, would you rather try to fuck your boss or disagree with him? Because, you know, I mean, if you try and you get rejected, there's some levity that's there. There's some understanding that, like, listen, man, like, we're all just trying to make it in this crazy world, and like, we're all looking for love in all the wrong places. But if you disagree with your boss, then it becomes a matter of, you're no longer a team player, and you potentially ruin your ability to make a living. And you're marked forever as a non-team player, essentially. And I've thought about that in the sense that I think that all the jobs that I've ever had, there is I've been challenged, but I've never been overwhelmed by my work. It's never really been the job itself. It's always been other people in the organization and being totally unable to disagree with them. Because really it is a matter of, if you want to disagree with people in the workplace, first of all, don't. That is the lesson for anyone that's trying to survive the system, is just don't. Never disagree. Do quiet quitting, or say that you'll do something and don't do it. That is the secret to surviving in most workplaces. If you don't agree with something, just do what they ask, but do it kind of poorly. Now, ideally, you should hold yourself to a standard. And I have been punished severely for holding myself to that standard, in the sense that, like, I believe too strongly in my ethics that I actually can't do the shut up and pretend to do my work thing. I see other people doing it, and that's great for them, and I can't really fault them on it, because not everyone has the level of disagreeableness and tolerance for conflict that I have. But you get punished quite severely for it. And it's for things like, even like very, very open ethical violations, like fake this, lie about this. There'll be situations where you're told to essentially enforce a standard, but then you get fired for enforcing the standard. Like a lot of these kind of catch-22 constructive dismissal things. I mean, everyone has experienced this. And some people have been lucky enough to be able to afford lawsuits to demonstrate it. And, good for them. I think for me, I think that I would be happy just to get a letter that says, I am a coward, and I fired you because I am a coward. That is the thing that I would like the most. Just because, I mean, money is money, and it's great, but the idea of being punished for something that you know is right and never getting confirmation that you were right, that's more crazy making than poverty is, I think. And that's not just because I'm some overwhelming ascetic. I just really want somebody to tell me that they just chickened out. It's fine to disagree, but just admit if you chicken out. And so when we're talking about disagreement being an intimate act, that's what I'm getting at. And I think, like most intimate acts, it is absolutely necessary for the continuation of anything. You don't do anything in the world unless you actually do have passionate people clashing and reaching an armistice and compromise on things. But the initial stress of actually having a conflict and getting into it with somebody, I mean, you almost never see that. And that, I think, is one of the huge declines of the West, so to speak. I don't know if it's because they took lead out of the water or because people don't day drink and have fist fights in the office anymore. Maybe it's because it's not male dominated, and adding women in the workplace has made it more conflict adverse and more sort of hive-mindish. Now, I'm not going to take the position that any particular arrangement of offices or societies or whatever needs to have a certain arrangement of male-female values or personnel or levels. That's an economic calculation. That's an econometric calculation thing, which I won't engage in. But I am speculating that perhaps that's what it is. And the fact that no one is passionate about anything, and we're just welcome to circle a drain in a comfortable way, I suppose that is yourself a person that has been forged by conflict and by agreement and negotiation, or have you just sort of been a passive agent in your own life? And so that's what we're getting at. Like, I don't want to think about ontology. I want to think about what is the process that actually makes a person a person. And when we're talking about, if I'm doing a job interview, what I would love to ask people is just like, you think murder is wrong, right? Okay, great. Why is murder wrong? Because if somebody can't actually give you a concrete answer as to why they think murder is wrong, one, it doesn't really show much of a depth. It's just them repeating what is around them. And that would tend to imply that once the area around them changes, so will their morality and ethics. And that's when you get into the first they came for the X and I did nothing and then no one came for me. That's how that starts. And even if you have a stupid idea or an incomplete idea about why murder is wrong, I think even that is amazing. To have an internal deliberation and an internal understanding and an idea of that. I mean, getting back to the whole politics thing, like, if somebody talks about politics for an hour and a half, I could give a shit. Because it really is just, most political commentary and most political discussion is just, well, these sources around me said, like this circle jerk of podcasts that I listen to have said this. And I'm repeating those positions, and I'm constantly just deferring to authority. But the minute that somebody has an independent thought, even if it's a stupid one, I mean, I don't want to be the no wrong answers kind of guy, but in a way, having an opinion on something that is entirely or as much your own as possible, because again, we can get into these shitty semantics and just talking about how, your opinions are not really your own and like you're using somebody else's language. And again, technically true, but it's frustrating to bring those things up. Don't be the exception guy. When we're talking about 95% of people, if you're focused on 5%, you are a person that just doesn't want the conversation to move forward. There is nothing that you contribute to the world by saying, but what about this marginal group? This thing that doesn't matter. What about this? I mean, you're just stymieing conversation by referencing the most exigent circumstances and the most unusual circumstances. You cannot move forward by waiting until you've collapsed every ambiguity and had a perfect system. Because, believe it or not, people that don't have perfect systems and don't think will just fill the void for you. Nature abhors a vacuum, especially a power vacuum. And there's also this idea that if you are paralyzed in non-action, well, non-action is just as much an action as actual action, believe it or not. So if you proceed with incomplete information and you fuck up, the outcome could be good or bad. But if you don't proceed because you're waiting for perfect information, the outcome could just be as equally good or bad. Now, most of surviving and thriving as a human being does involve action. So if you have a tendency towards always conserving energy, it would stand to reason that you'll never be able to accomplish anything because you're constantly paralyzed in fear and you're paralyzed in the want for perfect information. The unusual and unwise desire for perfect information. And also remember that going out into the world and doing things gets you information. It's reconnaissance, essentially. Just personally, they're complementary. To actually sit in a dark room and actually query your own mind for an hour, great. But you always want to match that with an hour of talking to people that you usually wouldn't, or just anyone that is not you. And I mean, as I've said, show up to a place where people will actually disagree with you. I mean, one of the things that got me thinking about libertarianism quite a lot was just some random guy at a party saying like, I don't know about systems that ask people to just do the right thing all the time. And that was another one of those situations. That was the homeless guy in the parking garage saying, well, first of all, you didn't ask me if I should be here. There's these small fractures and rent-free things that you get from people that you think about. They're like little stones in your shoe that you just cannot ignore despite their small size. And you can develop entire chains of thoughts and very fluid ideas just from these small disagreements and these small thoughts. And it's very, very important. And I think that people that disagree with you, as long as they're not just doing it to reassert somebody else's narrative on their behalf, I think that we actually should treasure people and tell them, like, thank you for disagreeing with me. I appreciate you actually listening to me well enough to have actually thrown something out at me. Even if it's shitty and informed by trauma, and even if it's got sophistry in it and it's making a lot of bad reductions, I suppose that's fine as long as you're open to it. And I just think of like, there's people do have this kind of this schizophrenia of identity in the sense that they're a different person for everybody else. And that in and of itself is some of that's survival, but I think the problem with that is you can be somebody for somebody else if it's a matter of survival. Like there's the work you that doesn't disagree with anything, and then there's the genuine present person for personal relationships. And I think that there's a tendency for people that are used to faking it and mirroring everything for everybody that eventually they lose who they are themselves. And that's when you run into a lot of issues. Because if you're not actually deliberating with yourself, if you're not actually metacognating about your motivations and about what you believe and who you are, that is when you run into a lot of trouble. And what I find really interesting too is that I've known actual schizophrenics, and to the degree that they were lucid, they tended to be the most genuine and present and real people that I've ever known. And I don't say that lightly. And it was one of those things where at the time I really took it for granted, just how unbelievably real they were. I remember there was one that I met, and I think one of the first things that I said to them, well, her, was she was writing in a notebook. And I said, "What are you writing in that serial killer scrawl?" as just a shitty joke. And what I got out of that was a few months later, maybe 8 full-page handwritten notes. And it was a very lucid and linear and well-written third-person account of a hallucination. And it opened up where you wanted to know what I was writing in this serial killer scrawl. Well, here it is. And when I think about that, I mean, first of all, when you were talking about the shitlib, snowflake, whatever, you would think, all right, well, that's a perfect opportunity for somebody that wants to weaponize an infirmity against you. Like, how dare you? Like, this was my coping mechanism. Like, this is the only thing that I was maintaining sanity, in this really high performance place. Because this is the tricky part. Like with her, so where we met was a snake pit of terrible personalities and awful people and very, very high pressure. And also, frankly, her family was awful as well. Just in being very oppressive and surveillant and putting a lot of expectations on her. And what was crazy to me was that everyone that knew her, and I mean everybody, had no idea whatsoever that there was a problem at all. Like maybe there was a sick day or something, or she'd move, just sort of darting around. There was a lot of resources behind her, I'll put it to you that way. And so no one knew that there was a problem, and she was always incredibly well presented and well put together and very intelligent. And in her private moments, the same intelligence came through, but it was just, I think because she suffered so much all the time that when she had moments where she was happy and functional and capable, completely dispensed with all the bullshit and just existed as a person, as genuinely as possible. There's a certain amount of trust that you have to have in people to be like that. But I think that trust also has with it a lot of reckless abandonment for being hurt. Because if you trust people, you will be set up to be hurt. Because a lot of folks will just find any possible weakness they can and then zone in on that and use that against you to take you out, to manipulate you, whatever it is. And so it does seem to be like with this intimacy, which is, disagreement and vulnerability, it really just seems to be almost kind of it's not suicidal. It's just sort of I don't know. It's sort of like a death wish for the false self, where you just decide that it's worth the risk. And maybe it's a thrilling thing. Like maybe you get some kind of dopamine squirt from that when you actually take a risk and you become more and more cavalier and more reckless. as time goes on. But whatever it was with her, and we were pretty young at the time, whatever it was with her, she just didn't care. Like the minute that she got an inkling that she could trust me, there you go. And everything was revealed, and it was, well, very instructive. I'll say that much. Like I wouldn't want to, well, no, fuck it. I'll say it. I think that she cured me of my cruelty. I think that you develop a lot of habits that are imposed upon you. So if there's a lot of negativity, and there's a lot of bullying, and there's a lot of shitty authoritarian parenting, that encodes onto your psyche. And it's not until someone shows you a way of interacting and dealing with other people that provides a good example to you. I don't think that you really necessarily have a incentive or even an example. Like I just think about it's like developing language, in the sense that you've only ever been spoken to in a way that is meant to manipulate you or triangulate you or make you or instrumentalize you. And so someone actually has to show up in your life and speak to you in a way that does not have any of those qualities to it at all. And everyone needs that person to actually show them that it's possible. And that's what she did for me. Because I do remember there was a conflict, and I just remember, I feel like I'm pretty measured now. But it was, I think I started the message with, "You are the most passive aggressive person that I've ever met." So just to give you an idea of the tempo and the timbre of the thing. But, and then I just remember, and I really took this for granted, but when she wrote back, it wasn't though she apologized reflexively reflexively. She apologized reflectively. Like I could tell that she had actually contemplated what I said, worked out what I had said. And there's this idea that was brought up about, in the middle of a conflict, asking the other person what their understanding of your opinion is, just so you know what you're saying is getting through. And when I say that I took her for granted, I would say one of these things was I could tell that she was able to understand my point, and thinking back on it, that she would have been able to tell me exactly what my point was and articulate it back to me. So I could tell, because in a lot of conflicts, you can tell where somebody is just taking a shitty straw man of what you said and they're throwing it back at you. Whereas this was a genuine understanding. And then, I mean, God, and then the follow-up to it was sending me a poem, which is all kinds of fucked up, because, I mean, I'm just thinking, like, here was a person that is dealing with hallucinations, like seeing people, like seeing whole people out of nothing, seeing demons, hearing the voice of God, hearing someone saying, "Fuck you, kill yourself, everybody hates you, don't eat that, that's poison," losing 6 hours of time. And here I was, just being a prick in a conflict, and her being graceful enough to actually come back with, I don't even know, like that amount of kindness, but that amount of thoughtfulness. And I'm not even sure which I like more, like it's, the kindness is one thing, but to have a relational intelligence like that. And it's, and more on taking it for granted, I just realized, like, it kind of spoiled me for other people, because Jesus Christ, nobody does that. Like, almost nobody does that. I do that, but it's only because she gave me that example very early on. And it was, I didn't even realize what was happening. I mean, I had some inkling of it. I remember the Eric Byrne thing, the games people play. There's this one section where he talks about parent-child and parent-parent. But it's essentially to say that, like, if something goes wrong, you don't say, "You broke this." You say, "Well, this is broken. How do we fix it?" Taking the blame and the moral sting out of a situation, because blame doesn't really do much to solve situations. It's more about just like a bland, objective observation. Like, if somebody's incompetent, you can say they're incompetent, but it's just more about not turning everything into a power game, actually finding solutions. So I had some awareness of that, but I didn't really articulate what the hell was actually going on with that for years. And so when I think about the self, the reason that it all ties in is because there's just something about probably somebody with the most unstable sense of self I could possibly think of actually being one of the most individuated people that I've ever met is insane to me. But it's probably quite instructive. It's just a matter of, like, I think for her, and unfortunately I don't have the opportunity to ask. I'll leave it at that. And I think for her it was just, so I'll have to speculate, but I think it was just a matter of, if your sense of individual and self is so fractured and so all over the place and just kind of comes and goes like the weather, that you are motivated to actually anchor yourself in something, and something important. And I think that is the lesson that we can take from this, in the sense that if you're going about life in a certain way and things are not going your way, to actually have courage to just think, what am I doing? How much of what I'm doing is actually me? If you're dedicating so much of your time to pleasing other people and to repeat back what they say to them and to just be an object of a system, I think that eventually you realize that you're now just a part of a system, and thus lose the will to live, in a sense. I remember I started skipping school pretty early on, and I remember exactly what did it. I read an article about how in Germany, if you break out of prison, you're still on the hook for the actual crime that you were in prison for, but you're not on the hook for the escape attempt, because they had determined that the desire to be free is a basic human right, and thus could not be subject to crime, or subject to prosecution, or to be made an offense as such. Just the desire to be free. And even that was enough to say, well, I'm in a system where I don't want to learn any of this shit. I don't want to be here. I hate everybody around me. And now I am free. And I think it was the idea of having an authority. This is like a science fiction analogy for this. Is I always think about Vonnegut and Ice Nine, and the idea being, I don't know like what kind of chemistry knowledge my 10 subscribers have here, but it was a more stable form of water. So basically it was ice at room temperature, but it was more stable than the water that was on Earth. So basically all of the water on Earth turned to ice at room temperature because of this more stable form was introduced. And that's what it seems to be with ideology, and why I'll never shut the fuck up about psychiatry and psychology and group systems. Because if you tell somebody the right thing at the right time in their life, it can change everything that they do, because it is a more stable ethic than what they've been given. So I was raised to think, shut up, go to school. It doesn't matter what you want. You're part of a system. And to have this one thought, which is, no, being free is a human right, and it's something that is inexorable from the human being. And that was enough for me to say, you know what? Fuck it, you're right. And I've never stopped feeling that. And when we talk about libertarianism and why we want people to admit that, yes, you're surviving and you are trying to do something, you don't have to believe in the system. And you need to get over, like, it. I understand that it's very psychologically traumatic to think, oh, I've been living a lie, and oh, I've been doing the wrong thing all this time, and I've lost so many great years to doing the wrong. It doesn't fucking matter. Like, would you rather die having never learned it? Or would you want, even if you've got 6 months, would you not want it to be as a free person that understands the system that they're in? Is that not what you would want, really? So it's just, so libertarianism is not, it's not a matter of voting in the right direction consistently and all this strategic stuff. It is just, once you understand the knowledge, just the idea that human rights, they apply to human beings, and they apply to all human beings equally. And the reason that I'm so insistent on Rothbard and Hoppe and having these, and Molyneux, and just having these very consistent ethics that are undeniable and are based on the most basic things, to be able to answer, like if I'm in that sort of theoretical job interview and somebody asks me why is murder wrong, I can say, well, because human rights are the thing that makes humanity possible in its greatest thriving. It is the most efficient. It is the most stable. It is the most consistent happiness for everybody, and it exists to the degree that personal property and autonomy are respected, absolutely. And if you have people murdering people, you're just going to go back to the Stone Age, because nothing can get done. No one wants to show up to work if they can get murdered for their pay at the end of the day. It's just nothing that we have. There's no parachutes or electric toothbrushes or running water or sunsets or holding hands on the beach if murder is right. Okay, so that is what I'd say in a job interview. I mean, just as a quick aside, I mean, like, one of the best ways to really fucking own job interviews is to do the Nixon thing of answering the question that you wanted to be asked. So when somebody says, so like, what kind of skills do you bring to the job? Or just some trite bullshit like that. I remember I did this once. I just said, you can read the resume and you can see all the skills, and you can even see where I've worked, and you can call and you can say, did he show up and how was he? What I can tell you, and what all these people will tell you, is that whenever something happened, wherever there was a crisis, wherever there was a problem, whenever people didn't know what to do, I was always the person that they turned around and looked at. And I think that the only decision you have to make is that when I'm in this workplace, that guy is no longer going to be you. It's going to be me. So what I have to ask you is, what do you think about that? And he said, and I'll never forget this, he said, well, I mean, at New York Fries, we tend to believe that the customer comes first. So how are you on your feet for a long time? Like, can you lift 40 pounds? I guess that's kind of what I'm getting at. And that conversation really changed me. So, so essentially it's just do what you have to do to get by, because everyone has liabilities, and you're always going to be a weaker cog in the system. And I spoke, I guess, the last one about the power process, about how you tend to resent and feel depressed in systems that you don't really have any agency over. And that is the idea. It's like, to the degree that you can control yourself and control your environment and actually do something for yourself, you don't have to be the greatest thing that's ever existed. Because I think the greatest thing that you can be is just a person who is self-made and a person who follows their instincts. And a lot of the discussions about like what those instincts should be and how to think about yourself and how to think about everything, it's just, I mean, it's good to explore that, but it's just focus on the small things first. Like, can you lift your own body weight, right? I mean, you should be able to lift your own body weight if you're capable of it. I mean, can you actually say no to somebody? Can you actually argue on your behalf? Can you overstep that fawn or freeze moment when you're in a conflict? I mean, are you just owned by the system around you? Do you know that you are not going out into the world as much as you should? Do you think that, are you making excuses? There's all these small things that you should actually have a handle on. Like, again, can you get a divorce before you have a revolution? That's what I'm asking of you.